Welcome everyone to the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference. This is Jessica from Cure SMA's Family Support Department, and we thank you all so much for joining us for the very first session of the conference week. We are grateful to our national presenting sponsors Biogen, Genentech, and Novartis Gene Therapies for their incredible support of this year's Virtual SMA Conference. Please note that all lines are muted during the webinar other than for the speakers. And you'll see that there's a chat conversation tab located on the right side of your screen, and you can use this to ask questions throughout the session. And now we would like to introduce our speaker, Jennifer Martin, a physical therapist, who's going to be talking to us today about the practical side of the pool. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be back at National Conference, albeit virtual. I look forward to being in person with everyone next year. But for this year, I'm really excited to talk about some things that are challenging to talk about when we're all together in the pool, like some really hands-on activities that we're now gonna have a chance to go through together. You guys can practice and apply in whatever water setting you have at home. So when we gather together in person next year, we'll be able to jump off from there. I love the National Conference because it is a chance to talk about being in the water, both with folks who are passionate about it. There are so many of you that are in the water every week, every day, and have learned how much independence and strength and pain you can deal with in that setting. And there are folks that are really scared of the water and the potential safety issues that come with that. And hopefully, as we move through this presentation today, you'll get a better idea of how you can make the water a safe environment for you. I love to collaborate on ideas with folks to improve independence and strength, balance, breath control. You're going to hear me talk a lot about breathing and breath control today because it's so easy to hold your breath or shorten your breath whenever you're doing activities, either in the water or out of the water. And moving with breathing is a life essential skill. And so we're going to talk about that a lot today and how to incorporate that with exercise. And finally, I love to spark curiosity in folks that are doing things in the water. What can they do different? How can they advance where they're at to be able to move to a different step of exercise and independence? And there has not been a national conference where that curiosity hasn't been sparked in me by working with all of you in the water and thinking about different things that I can do, both in my practice and in helping other people with their independence in the water. Next slide, please. Every exercise that I think about doing in the pool to help people with their balance, with their breath control, with their strength, with their range of motion, looks at incorporating breathing with the motion. If you incorporate your breathing with the motion you're trying to do, not only do you take deeper breaths, which is important for lung and pulmonary health, it gives you better range of motion. And as you practice this, you'll see it at home. Can I include trunk balance and strength in an activity? Especially for the folks that I work with that are full-time power chair users or full-time manual chair users. To use your trunk muscles is really hard when your mobility environment really limits your trunk all day long. So I'm always thinking, how can I get those muscles engaged in the water? Does the activity we're doing in the water improve what you're able to do out of the water? If I'm working on range of motion, if you have a little bit of range of motion, maybe 25 or 30 degrees at your shoulders on land, if I can get your shoulders to 90 degrees and help them to work in that plane, I have given your shoulders the chance to move in a whole different environment, better lubrication for your shoulder joint, which should help with pain. And again, especially at the shoulders, the more I can get your arms away from your trunk, the more you can breathe through the lateral aspect of your ribs because your arms aren't tucked right in there. And I'm looking often for an endurance component in my activities. Is there a way to get some muscle endurance, cardiopulmonary endurance, because again, for folks with decreased mobility or our full-time chair users, getting any kind of endurance exercise is really, really challenging. So I look at that in any of my sessions and in all of my activities. Where are you going to start? Next slide, please. I always, every time I get in the pool with every patient, regardless of how long I have worked with them, it's always safety. The water provides incredible freedom, but there's also a danger element in the pool with having water right there and protecting airways. I'm always thinking about safety, and that is what I encourage everyone to think about every time you get in the pool. If suction or BiPAP is part of your regular pulmonary routine, you use it on and off all day long, it should be poolside, so you have that support if you need it. Not in the locker room, not in your car, it should be poolside. I have used both of them poolside in situations that come up quickly, and to have to go out to the car or back to the locker room to get that equipment just adds a lot of stress and anxiety to a panic situation if we're trying to get airways clear. When I start activities in the water, the plan is to start in a space where people feel safe. Sometimes that's sitting on the chair that you got in the water on. Sometimes if it's a young kid, it's in mom's arms or sitting next to a parent or playing a game with the parent. For some people, they prefer to be standing up and holding on to the wall. It's starting where you feel safe and progressing from there. Start at what feels easy and add resistance, add complexity, play with the buoyancy of the water. And we'll talk about all those as we go through today's presentation. And where to start with water temperature. A therapeutic pool is anywhere from 90 to 95 degrees. Generally, I find the greatest success between 92 and 93 degrees. Anything warmer than that is pretty hot. Anything cooler than that, I have some folks, especially if you're pretty mobile, you have a lot of anti-gravity mobility, that prefer the cooler water. You may want an 82 to 86 degree pool if you're really getting your heart rate up. If you're really getting you have a lot of movement, that cooler water might feel better. But if you're a full-time power chair user or a full-time manual chair user, generally your body will feel better in that warmer 92 to 93 degree pool. Next slide, please. With any exercise, the one cardinal rule I have for everything is no breath holding, no breath holding, no breath holding. With all activity, we combine breathing with movement because it maximizes your functional skills. Arms away from your chest, opens up your chest, that's when you're going to breathe in. When I push my arms back together, it's like I'm pushing my chest closed. That's when I'm going to push that air out of my chest and I'm going to exhale. So as I move through different exercises, we'll talk about breathing, but think about how that works for your body pattern also. So we're going to start with a place that I start many of my sessions, and that's with floats on arms. Next slide, please. It's a really easy place to start. Those floats that you see on Krista's wrists are Velcro. They're 1 inch thick, and all they do is bring her arms up away from her chest, and they just hang out there. I have right now, if she did nothing else, I've given her better lateral breathing. The sides of her chest can expand and contract better because her arms aren't right there. I'd put her shoulders in a different space than they generally would be in if she was a full-time chair user. And I've given her lots of places to move and to start to work on balance. Oftentimes, I will start this in sitting. People come in to the pool that I work in on deck lifts. So they come in from the side of the pool and they're lowered into the water. And we'll start this right in that chair. Sometimes we'll start in standing if that's where folks are more comfortable. It's a good place to first adjust to the water pressure. That pressure on your chest, if you have any sort of pulmonary compromise, can be daunting to breathe against when you first get in the water. My encouragement is that you take slow breaths that you think about filling your lungs all the way down. And if you have these floats on your wrist, that you bring your arms apart to really open your chest up and inhale and slowly bring them back together. So your body has a chance to adjust to that water pressure. And generally, after folks take a couple deep breaths, they feel like they have their pulmonary system re-regulated. Sometimes they get anxiety if they get that pulmonary stress, and that anxiety will drop off too. Where would I go after this? That's a really simple place to start, right? Arms apart. We're doing breathing and shoulder exercises. So what's going to be next? Next slide, please. The next space we're going to look to go after starting with really simple floats on arms. And those floats come in a 1-inch width and they come in a 2-inch width. I have a list that's attached to this program, and it tells you where we get everything. We are sponsored by no one. All I've done on that list is list where I buy things directly off the internet, and you have access to those same sources also. Next slide, please. So for me, I'm going to look at adding resistance from that spot where we started with Krista. Those blue fins on the left are cool because, again, they Velcro on to wrists, or I can Velcro them onto ankles. And they give resistance in all planes. And if you don't have good hand function, you don't have to hold on to them, which is ideal. Those items on the right, we call boxing gloves because the kids love to box with them. We'll talk about that later. They give resistance, again, in all planes. They don't provide any flotation, really. The ones on the left have a little bit of neoprene, so they do help with flotation to keep arms up. And the ones on the right, the green barbells or barbarian jousters, my kids have lots of great names for those. Those have really no flotation, but I can do exactly the same exercises, arms apart and together, pushing down in the water and bringing your arms back up through the water, both in front or arms straight down to the side. Next slide, please. Then I'm going to make things more dynamic, right? It's cool to do everything symmetrical and in sitting, but here you see ball pushing. Could we run that video one more time, please? Here you see ball pushing. So this young man has to take the ball in. Here he goes. He's going to push it out. So he has to keep his trunk up while he pushes that mass out, and he has to keep his trunk up while he takes that ball in. That actually takes a lot of balance from there. If I was going to progress it from there, I'd have him push with one hand all the way across his body. So he's pushing the ball from his right hand to his therapist's right hand. So he has to use his trunk muscles that cross his body. Again, when you're a full-time chair user, getting any sort of trunk activity, especially one side on its own and then the other, or asymmetrical trunk activity, is really hard to get. So I try to capitalize that in the water. This is a great opportunity also to get fingers stretched out. That warm water is a nice place. A lot of folks have a tough time with active finger extension. The warm water lets you access those muscles a little bit better. And you can see he's really working on that with the ball, trying to get all of his fingers open. I love that dynamic activity. Next slide, please. So we've gotten really adjusted to the water pressure from either doing arm exercises, pushing the ball. Oftentimes I will move then from sitting up to supine or being on your back. It really depends on how folks are doing with that water pressure. If you move from having the water all the way around your chest to floating on your back, then it takes that pressure off the front of your chest and can make it easier to breathe. Some folks really like that break, either after doing sitting activities or after doing standing activities. And that's a way that I just keep things mixed up for postural changes and to make sure that no one's getting anxiety just from feeling that pressure to breathe. Being on your back gives you a great opportunity to work in range of motion that is completely gravity eliminated. All the pressure's off your spine, all the pressure's off your hips, and now you can really focus on just moving and getting an opportunity to really move on your own in the water. This is a place where we'll talk about later. I work on endurance activities. Right now, we're going to work on active range of motion. Let's also talk about how to be stable when you're doing true exercises on your back. Next slide, please. So we move from sitting to supine. That exercise needs to be done with stability. And I use head collars when I'm doing true exercise for stability. The collars you see here are a sample of what we have. We probably have 4 or 5 others. And the best collar is the collar that you're happiest with. It could be one of these. It could be one you've designed yourself. There's multiple out there, and it's really important to find the best one for you. So here's my plug for coming to next year's national conference. We bring all of our head collars, and you can play with all of them right there at the pool and figure out which one you like. They are used for support and safety when we're doing exercise. If you are using a head collar for that, it's really important that you still, especially if you cannot right yourself in the water and bring yourself to upright, that there is someone with eyes on in arm's distance able to support you if you get flipped and are unable to clear your airway. That safety component is huge. These neck collars, none of them are life-saving devices unless it is a true life jacket and it says it's a life-saving device. So these provide great support. They provide some better independence, but they still require supervision. When I have these on, people aren't focused on, am I floating? They can really focus on the exercise that we're trying to get at. Keeping their head out of the water, focusing on my arms moving, are my legs moving? Is the muscles in my trunk, are they keeping my body where I want it to be? Some people, when they're doing prolonged kicking, they're doing a backstroke or a modified backstroke, prefer to not have these on for that. That's great. That's totally fine. But when I'm doing focused exercise, I always have these on so we can focus on the exercise and not on getting swamped with water. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite activities because it accomplishes so many things. We have a noodle under this young man's hips because his hips are really tight. So we put the noodle under there to give him a little bit of passive stretch, bring his hips up. It helps him to float. This is his favorite collar because he's tried all of the ones we have, and this is the one that he feels most comfortable with. Generally, the collars that don't attach in front, and you might be able to see that here, it comes around near the front, but it doesn't attach. They need to be adjusted periodically. Otherwise, they sort of slip out the back. So be aware of that as you're looking at different collars, that it's going to need to be adjusted, or it can either slip all the way out or just hold people's head in a position that's not particularly comfortable. For our younger kids, we call this butterfly swimming. For the teens and the adults I work with, I refer to this as jumping jacks. So it's arms all the way up. This young man hangs out in his power chair. He's independent with his power mobility. His arms hang right next to his side. So for him to be able to do jumping jacks, get his arms all the way up over his head and work on that motion is a completely different plane for his shoulders, lubricates his entire shoulder joint, stretches out his lateral chest when his arms come up, and gives him that freedom of movement in the pool. Usually we will have kids do this with their legs also, so their knees will come apart and knees will come back together, again, like they're doing jumping jacks. For this young man, he's just working on his arms. When we start to teach this, I teach one at a time. We do arms, and then we do legs, and then if we want to challenge, we'll integrate it all together, arms and legs at the same time. When we're doing this to move through the pool, it's arms up slowly, legs apart slowly, and everything comes back down next to your side quickly. And that gives you momentum through the pool. And that is really nice to get that movement, to feel that water in all sensory areas as it moves around your body. So again, it's arms up slowly, legs apart slowly, and everything comes back down next to your body quickly. So go back to what we talked about earlier. How am I going to combine that with breathing? If I'm just doing arms, it's pretty straightforward. Arms come away from your body. You're stretching out that side of your chest. You're going to inhale. And when they come back down quick, you blow out fast. When I'm just doing legs, I do the same combination. Legs apart, knees apart. We're going to inhale. Legs come back together. You're going to push that air right out of your chest. And so then when you combine the two, in theory, it flows well together. But I'll tell you, if you haven't done jumping jacks in a long time, or if you've never done jumping jacks, that coordination between your arms and legs can be tricky. So don't get caught up in, I have to do it together. Get caught up in getting that range at your arms, getting that range at your hips, and coordinating that with your pulmonary function, because that's really what matters. If you do one arm at a time, it is more challenging from a balance standpoint, from a trunk muscle standpoint, to feel stable on the water. So you bring one arm up, inhale, down, exhale, and then bring the other side up. Doing anything asymmetrically, one side at a time, is much more challenging from a balance side for your trunk. So that's the next place I would go from here with this young man if he was really just comfortable with his arms. Always thinking, where's the next place to go? How am I going to add more challenge? If he got good at one arm at a time, then I could put those fins that we saw several slides ago, I could put those on and give him some resistance as he pushed up. So he had to work harder against the resistance of the water. When you're talking about resistance, the faster you move in the water, the more resistance you get. So if all I'm looking for is motion and easy movement, we're going to go nice and slow. If I'm looking for strength or speed through the water, the faster I go, the more muscle I have to use and the more propulsion I'll get through the water. Next slide, please. So we've done some time working in sitting. You have some things you can work on sitting, either on a chair or on a pool bench. I'm fortunate that the pool I work in has a beautiful bench that we can sit and work on sitting balance on. But it's important to have some exercises you can work on in standing. We start a lot of our sessions for folks that are comfortable in standing, and that's where they prefer to be, in upright, supported upright. We start a lot of sessions in standing. So how deep do you want to be in the water for standing? If we went back, which we're not going to do, but think about that young man sitting on the chair when he was pushing that ball. He was in mid-chest deep water. Mid-chest deep water is generally the target I work for. That's 75% body weight removed. It gives you just enough weight to anchor to the floor, but just enough buoyancy relief from the water to take that pressure off your back and spine. So we work a lot at the mid-chest deep level to allow for functional interaction with the floor and water support. I have a lot of folks say, gosh, standing would sure be cool, but I don't stand very well. My hips are so tight that when I go to stand, I wind up falling on my face. And clearly that's not comfortable and it's not functional and it's not getting at what I want. You'll see a picture of this in a second. We will often use flotation under your arms or have people sitting on flotation and then do weights anywhere from a ½ pound to a £1.5 pounds, depending on what folks need and how much hip flexion contracture they have, how old they are, how much they weigh, to bring your lower extremity and your pelvis down underneath you better and give you that connection to the floor. Those weights are on that supply sheet that I mentioned earlier, and you can look those up. For the little kids, like under 10, I usually do the pound to the half-pound weights. Anyone over 10, I do a pound and a half, generally up to 2 pounds per leg. That usually gives me enough anchor to help bring your pelvis back underneath you and bring you upright and stable against the water. Again, something you can play with as far as weights go. Here's my next plug for coming to National Conference next year, because we bring all that stuff with us, and you can really figure out that weight that works best for you. When we start with folks walking, whether they have weights on or they don't, we start a lot of sessions just walking forwards, walking backwards. A lot of folks that we get up and walking, especially if they are full-time chair users, walking forwards is good. You're used to forward motion. Walking backwards really makes you have to use those muscles in the back of your hips. I love that, because when you use the muscles in the back of your hips, neurologically, it gives that stretch idea to the muscles in the front of your hips. It actively stretches them out and it turns them off a little bit. So we work on backwards walking with 95% of our folks, just to get the back of your hips to turn on and the front of your hips to stretch out. Backwards walking is not leaning back in the water and pushing your feet in front of you. It is being upright and pushing, doing your best to get your knee as far behind your hip as you can. So truly using that muscle behind your hip to push your leg backwards and getting that stretch through the front of your hip. We work on sideways walking, crab walking, as some of our younger clients like to call it. When we do that, we emphasize bringing your knees together. For most of our folks, they tend to sit with their knees apart. So we emphasize make sure you're bringing your knees all the way together and stretching your legs out as far as you can. And marching. We have had really good luck with folks who are full-time chair users being able to march, get one foot off the floor and put it back down. It is daunting to get your foot that far off the floor, but it really helps get your weight shifted from side to side, which helps stretch out your lower ribs and your pelvis, especially if you don't have a fusion. If you have a fusion and that area is locked down, which is very common for a lot of the folks we see, just getting your weight all the way onto one leg or another and really experiencing that motion is important. And marching allows you to do that in a really safe way in the water. And it's been a great activity for balance and for confidence and for movement. And if you can stand without support, then you can go back, way back to where we started in that chair, back to those floats on your arms, back to those resistant cuffs on your wrist, to the barbells. And you can move on from there and work on some resistance activities that are not only going to work on strength in your trunk, in your shoulders, in your hips, but are going to work on balance too. Next slide, please. My favorite activity for, stop for a second, because you went to the right slide and I didn't.
Oh,
Isn't that handy?
do you want me to switch anything, or is this the right one?
No.
Okay.
No, I have this printed out. And so in my head, I had boxing next, but it's not, it's standing.
I'll mute, and then whenever you're ready to get started, you can get started.
Okay, cool. So here we're looking at kids that have different ways of standing. The young man on the left has that support noodle that we talked about. His therapist is there to give him some support. You can't see, but he has half-pound weights on his feet. Sometimes we can use fins, and just the weight of the fin is enough to keep him anchored to the ground. This is such a great position for him because it gives his hips a chance to actively stretch out. It gives his gut a chance to actively stretch out. That standing position in the water provides so many physiologic supports that we just can't get out of the water. It helps to get fluid out of his legs and back up through his kidneys. And it's such a functional, fun place to play. You can see he's having a great time, and he is supported here, but he can be independent also. The little girl on the right, you can see is clearly very comfortable on the wall. I like wall walking when we can do it because, again, you're upright. You have your arms moving, you have your legs stretched out as they can be. And you'll see here in a second, she does a little bit of a bouncing, jumping movement. I have clients that come in and say, when I say, what are your goals today? What do you want to work on? Why did you pick aquatic therapy? And they said, you know what? I want to bounce. I never get to bounce. I want to feel what that feels like. Okay, bouncing. We can bounce in the water where you cannot bounce on land because gravity's hard. But jumping and bouncing, as you can see on the right, is a lot of fun. The other thing I love to do in standing, next slide please, is boxing. And you can see this young man is quite the boxer. One of the things I love about this is boxing is something that most folks that are full-time chair users, it's just something that they never feel like they can engage in, right? How am I ever going to get gloves on, move like that, hit anything? And especially when the kids or young adults in this situation get to box with a therapist, once they figure out they're not going to hurt us, this is a favorite activity. I love this activity for multiple reasons, right? He's on his feet, so he's taking active steps. He is pulling his elbows back behind his shoulders. So he's getting that rotation through his trunk that he can never get in his power chair. Moving his arms in a plane that's shoulder level, arms flexed to 90 degrees. Again, most people don't spend time exercising in that position. And if I can give arm support there, I can lubricate the shoulder there. I can use all the muscles that surround the shoulder joint in that space to be active. It's awesome. And again, he doesn't have a spinal fusion, so we can get and we encourage that rotation at his trunk. If you have a spinal fusion, that rotation is not possible, but that shoulder movement is possible, and we really encourage that, not only to use the muscles in the back of your shoulder, but it also stretches out the whole front of your chest. Back to my theme at the beginning, the more range I can get at the front of your chest, the better it's going to be for breathing, right? So how am I going to incorporate breathing with this? I have my clients tell me are they going to breathe with their right arm coming forward or their left arm coming forward? Generally, there's a routine or a rhythm that feels natural. And so my clients tell me what feels natural to them, and that's what we go with. Breath holding does feel natural to some of them, and we don't go with that. You've got to be breathing through all the exercises. Got to be breathing. Next video, please. We do a lot in standing because there's a lot to do functionally. And again, if you can be stable there, it's great. This is an exercise that I do for folks that can stand, but I also do it for folks that cannot stand. I do it for folks that have great shoulder motion, and I do it for folks that have limited shoulder motion, and I provide extra support. It can be adapted to whatever abilities you have. So you see he starts holding onto the wall with both hands, similar to that little girl we saw before. The little girl we saw wall walking, she kept her hands right in front of her. This young man is spinning. I love this activity first and foremost because spinning is a great activity. It's something that it's hard to do in a chair, or if you're a marginal walker. This is not a position of stability when you're spinning through space, but in the water, it's a great spot. So he's going to hold on. he's going to reach back. You'll see him reach back with his right hand. Oops. Now he's going to reach back with his right hand. And use everything on the back of his trunk. He's going to stretch out the entire front of his chest, and then he can spin around and bring those arms together. So he gets posterior trunk stretching. He gets posterior trunk strengthening. He gets the same for the front of his chest, both strengthening and stretching. I love this activity. And for folks that have spinal fusion, your trunk stays symmetrical and in line the whole time, so this activity works. Where we have limitations is how much motion you can get at your shoulder. Next slide, please. So we've looked at a lot of different activities. We've looked at starting and sitting, moving to supine or being on your back, being an upright. What can you work on upright? What does that look like? How can you advance that? How can you make that more challenging or more supportive? Endurance activities, if you're a full-time chair user or if you're someone with limited abilities in mobility, can be really hard to get. And the water is a perfect place to do that because you have support and you have enough resistance and buoyancy to keep you moving and active. There's lots of ways to do endurance activities. I always have people start slow. You need to get out of the water feeling good. We start with generally a 2-minute walk test. How far can you go in 2 minutes? And we'll progress endurance activities from there. 2 minutes doesn't seem like very long, but for some people, that is exhausting, and that's fine. That's a great place to start. I have some people that are working up to 30 to 45 minutes of endurance activities in the pool. We progress slowly. We watch heart rates, and I really let them be the guide. If cardiology, for my folks that have cardiologists involved, I let cardiology really drive where we need to be. People will tell me if they are having pulmonary concerns, it's hard for me to breathe. We always stop with any sort of, I'm tired, I need to catch my breath. That is the cue to stop immediately and just let your body re-regulate. Cardio exercise is really hard to find if you're a power chair user. But there have been so many studies that outline the importance of endurance or continued activity for folks that are full-time chair users. Next slide, please. The water, as I said, provides a great opportunity for that. This is one of my favorite pictures. As you can see, the therapist on the left is wearing a face shield. That's how we are dealing with COVID in the water. And if you want to hear more about that, there'll be another talk on aquatic therapy and how we deal with that in the time of COVID and how that relates as we think forward into moving into flu season, moving into cold season, and how do we deal with that in an aquatic setting. And the little girl on the right has a full face snorkel. She does not wear that for a full session, I promise. But this allows her to be on her stomach. Which is a position very few people, especially if you are a full-time chair user, feel comfortable getting into due to hip tightness, due to pulmonary pressure on the front of your chest. It's just not a space you can get in. But to be able to move your arms there, to be able to move your legs and be on your stomach is huge, and she loves it. So we have a lot of our clients in full face snorkels. They come in multiple sizes, and they have been a great gift to the aquatic community, because oftentimes coordinating the breathing for a standard snorkel where you put that mouthpiece in and you have the goggles over your nose, that can be really disorienting and feel very threatening from a pulmonary side. So this full face snorkel, you breathe through your mouth and nose regularly, and it has been great. I have people use it in the pool. Clearly, we use it for endurance and that continued activity. I have people take it on vacation. Go look at the fish in Hawaii, or go check out the the things at the bottom of the pool in the hotel. And it's been a great opportunity for that. We take a break, mask off, about every 5 minutes to make sure there's good airflow. Some people want it off faster than that. That's fine. Some people are good and they tell us we're good to go, but generally as a rule, every 5 minutes, the mask needs to come off as if people are doing a continuous activity. And the reason for that is there have been some issues with long-term wear, closer to 45 minutes to an hour, where there have been some oxygen exchange issues, not in a therapeutic setting that I'm aware of, but on a Caribbean vacation setting. I want to make sure that everyone that comes into the aquatic setting always feels like they're pulmonary stable, so we always check. Because folks are on their stomach, we always set up a safety cue also, because I can't see your face, I can't see if there's something wrong. So the cue that we use is shaking your head no. It's always eyes on when we have people with full face snorkels on. I see someone shake their head no, and they're picked up immediately out of the water to make sure they're not having mask leakage, they're not having a tough time breathing, they're not hurting. And you always want to make sure you have that cue set up for whatever's the easiest for yourself or for whoever you're in the water with. Next slide, please. Upright running in the water. So you can, for endurance, you can do snorkeling. You can be upright in the water, and you can see that this woman is upright. She's walking in the water, and for her, that's an endurance activity. We could walk for 15 or 20 minutes. She's very comfortable with that, and she would be good with that. Her feet on the floor adds to her balance, so she doesn't have to use her trunk muscles really that much, but she can keep herself moving. She can keep that activity going, and that's great. But once we get her moving and into a deeper part of the pool, can we run that video one more time, please? Thank you so much. Now you can see in this part of the video that her feet are off the floor. She is running in the water. If you look really closely, she has her arms moving to push the water away. There she is with her feet back on the floor. But with her feet off the floor, her trunk has to be more active. Her legs are moving to keep her moving through the water. And she'll run full length of the pool. It takes her about 8 minutes to get down and back. And at the end, she feels like she's had a good workout. She's tired, but not exhausted. She is pulmonary stable. She's not short of breath. And she feels no other signs of exhaustion. And she loves that moment to just be active and engaged with her body for a prolonged period of time. Next video, please. And this feels obvious, doesn't it? Like, what else would you do for a prolonged period of time in the water except kick? It's easy. There's lots of different ways to support it. You can do kicking on your back for a long period of time. We don't have to worry about pulmonary support because your face is exposed. I can see exactly what's happening. I can put a float under your hips if your hips are tight to keep your pelvis from kind of dragging you down. And we can go for long periods of time. Either straight kicking, which you can see she does, just regular forward and back. We'll oftentimes, if we're doing this for endurance, we'll do a lap of straight kicking. We'll do a lap of jumping jack or butterfly kicking, and we'll mix that up to get the leg muscles to use multiple different groups for a prolonged period of time, getting that active stretch, getting that muscle pump through your legs to return the blood and the fluids back to the lymph system and get that process through your body and out. And this is a great way to do an endurance activity and feel really safe and stable. I have some people that will do 2 laps of kicking, then they'll do a lap of water running, then they'll kick back, and then we'll put their snorkel on and they'll do a couple laps of snorkel. So they'll mix things up, and that's great. It's about keeping it interesting and fun and engaging. Because if you're not engaged and you're not having a good time, you're not going to come back and do it again. And the water's a place to have a great time, to feel that support and come back and do it again and again, because it takes gravity off your body. It feels good. It takes care of your joints and your pulmonary system. And you can't find that in a world filled with gravity. But we live in a world filled with gravity. Next slide, please. And so I have all of my clients that are in the pool move outside every day for 20 minutes. Outside, moving. So not necessarily walking, most of my clients do not walk, but to get out and to be active every day for 20 minutes is another great way to develop that endurance in the gravity-filled world that we spend most of our time in. Walk, push, be pushed, drive. I prefer outside versus inside, because outside you feel that wind on your face, you see the sound, you get the vitamin D. It is a spectacular activity in multiple arenas of your body. So get in the water, because you're more active and you're more independent there. But those days you're not in the water, I always encourage my clients, get out for a walk every day. And that's saying a lot, because I come from Seattle. And if you know anything about Seattle, we get rained on all the time. So we just don't go out in the rain, because it's not so easy with power chairs. But every so often we have breaks in the rain, and people get out and they get vitamin D and they meet their neighbors, and it's a big deal. It's really important. Next slide, please. I get asked often, so can I do my stretching program in the water? Yes, you can. But just like on land, you have to be wise about how you do your stretching program. I love doing stretches in the water because you have a great chance to get your body warmed up, to get some motion going at your joints before you actually do your stretching. When I talk to people about doing their stretching program on land, I say, that's great. You should do it every day. But you want to do it when you're a little bit warmed up. If you can do it after your shower, it's better. For my folks that are mobile, that are up walking, get up, jump into your stretching program, because you'll feel like you get a better stretch, and you will get a better stretch because you've got fluids moving a little bit. So it's the same in the water. If I'm going to do a stretching program in the water, we are going to kick a couple laps. We're going to walk a couple widths. We're going to push a couple balls or spin on the wall. And then we're going to do the stretching program. Next slide, please. Whenever I'm doing stretching in the water, I'm always really conscious about where my hands go to minimize the torque forces across either long bones or joints. So I'm always very cautious. You can see here, my hands are really close together around this knee joint. I have one hand up on the thigh, one hand on the calf, and they're very close to the joint. And that gives me stretch at the joint, but not too much force. If I put my hand that's on the calf, if I move that way down towards the ankle, there would be a lot of force through that lower bone, and that can be unsafe. So I keep hands together, and I always keep my pressures even between both hands and nice and slow, because I want to make sure that I get a stretch, but I don't cause joint damage or tissue damage or bone damage. I stretch after I'm warmed up. And I always make sure that I'm getting good feedback from the folks that I'm stretching. People know, is it a stretch? Is it painful? Can you feel anything? Sometimes I'm putting so much pressure that I'm like, you've got to be feeling a stretch. Nope. Okay. I go to what feels like comfortable end range, and I'll hold it there after we're warmed up. And it's been a great spot to do to do stretching and to get that motion. Some people, when I put just a little bit of pressure on, oh my gosh, that's so much of a stretch. Great. I always take that feedback and I stretch to where people are comfortable, and I stretch to where they feel like they're getting that feedback from their body that they need as far as how long their muscles are. I love being in the water, and I hope this time has given you a chance to feel like you have that opportunity to jump in the water, to be a little bit creative, and you have a place to start from and to progress to, so you feel like you're caring for your body in the safest, most supportive, most independent environment. Next slide, please. Thank you for letting your mind wander to a place where you can see the water space that will benefit you or will benefit a loved one, because the freedom that is found outside of gravity is indescribably wonderful. I really appreciate you joining me for this session, and I wish you a great rest of this virtual national conference.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing and providing this presentation today. We're so grateful for your time and insight. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate everyone who joined in today. There is a survey linked in this sessions page, and then you'll also be receiving a follow-up email with that survey link, and we welcome any feedback that you have to share. And once again, we're incredibly thankful for the support from our sponsors for making the 2021 virtual SMA conference possible. Don't forget to join us for this evening's first virtual exhibit hall. It's from 4 to 6 p.m. Central Time. You can come and visit and check out the booths, meet the exhibitors, and learn more about their services and products. And then you'll also be entered to win a prize for each booth that you attend. And if you look to the slide, you'll see that we have a closing session, and we'll be announcing the prize winners at the closing session on Friday evening. And if there's anything that we can do, or if you have any additional questions, please email us at familysupport@curesma.org. Have a great day, everyone. And again, thank you for joining us for the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference.